Yeah, I mean, we're gonna beat Canada and win
Oh
gold.
no,
You
no, you're
guys,
not.
you guys don't have any goaltending to speak of, and
Carter Hart's looking good.
ah, please, unless Tortorella's coaching Team Canada, I ain't gonna last. Uh, so, obviously, we all know that we haven't gone to the Olympics in the last couple of cycles because they know that U.S. is going to beat Canada. They're trying to delay it as long as they can. The Canadians who run the league.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another BTR podcast. Today, we're joined by a very special guest. So without further ado, let me introduce him. He's a senior NHL writer for ESPN, and you could catch him on various different podcasts and radio shows throughout Canada and the US. He also has his own podcast, which he hosts with Arda O'Kel, called The Drop. We're joined by Greg Wyshynski today. Hey,
Hello.
Greg, how's it going?
I'm good, man. I think it's a good way to describe my content output. Various things across the US and Canada. It's like, there's no way. I host a food podcast. I host a comedy podcast. There's a hockey podcast. I write on a thing. Like, it's a lot of stuff. So I think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you so much for joining us. I know it's a busy time, the season just starting up. So thank you for making the time for us. And hopefully we impress you a little bit here too as well. Okay, let's get right into it. Off the bat, first thing, the biggest story of probably the off season, leading into the regular season, is the whole Pride jersey to now Pride tape fiasco. So just a quick timeline for everybody. NHL banned, like, I guess, the Pride jersey during warm-ups, along with other jersey nights. For example, for the Canucks, Diwali night for the South Asians, or Black History Month. And around the league, hockey fights cancer. I think you could correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, but and then recently they decided to ban Pride tape, which obviously everybody was like, why? And after Travis Dermott was the first player to put the Pride tape on his stick, they decided to rescind it. So your overall reaction and of first the initial situation, and then getting it getting it banned and then unbanned at the same time.
Well, I mean, the initial situation is what it is. I mean, they obviously are placating a small minority of players who were made to feel uncomfortable by having to participate in Pride Night, because the teams were sort of mandating it a little bit by saying, here are all your jerseys and your lockers, just wear them. So they were trying to make sure that those people weren't called out like they were last season. And they were also trying to keep the teams off the hook, because if you remember, there's a few teams that also decided not to do Pride Night because they were worried about some of their players, particularly the Russian players. Obviously, I don't agree with that decision, but the logic is there, and the NHLPA didn't fight back on it, because they also have to represent both the players that don't want to participate in things like Pride Night as well as the players that do. So that decision was made, and it was big and controversial. But then we got to the point of overreach. I think everybody can agree that it's overreach to say that you're going to honor the beliefs and philosophies of a minority of players, but then don't honor those beliefs of the majority of your players. And by taking away the opportunity to use Pride tape, as players have done for the last 6 or 7 seasons, you're basically saying, we hockey is for everyone, but we don't want you to display that on the ice. So I give full marks to the NHL Players Coalition, which is a committee that the NHL started to try to improve access to the game, diversity in the game, because they really kind of drove the bus a little bit on getting the conversation going about reinstating Pride tape. This was after the memo to the teams that banned it. And so they met like a week ago, and then Travis Dermott puts the Pride tape on a stick, as he's done in previous seasons, as sort of a statement. And then also on Monday, Scotiabank in Canada started giving away 5,000 rolls, I believe it was, of Pride tape, specifically saying we want to do this because we want to show that hockey is inclusive. And I have it on good authority, and it's sourced that the campaign that they did was in direct relation to the NHL banning it. So those two things happened, and then lo and behold, after those conversations with the league and the Players Coalition, the decision is reversed. And it's the right call. I mean, the idea that something as innocuous as that couldn't be done on the ice during a regular game or on Pride Night is ridiculous. The NHL's counter response to that is that they found it was going to be an end around, they called it, of the jersey ban. And they thought, okay, well, this is just going to be another thing where people are looking who's using it, who's not, and then going after the players who's not. But for me, man, it's like I think the conversation changes once it becomes a personal choice, when it becomes not mandated, but something that somebody's doing voluntarily. I think the people that are doing it, like we saw with Travis Dermott, if you're doing it voluntarily, fans are going to celebrate you. Like the reaction to Dermott was not, oh, look at the other 19 guys that didn't do it. Like the reaction was, hey, that's awesome, this guy did it. And I think that once you make it voluntary, it changes the conversation. It's no longer players boycotting something, but it's players voluntarily participating in something. And I think at the end of the day, the right call was made.
Yeah, I wonder what the backlash would have been if he was, for whatever reason, suspended a game or like fined whatever amount, because I'm sure it would have been like a massive backlash, not just from reporters and players, and because Brian Burke has publicly said, I'm willing to pay the fine if there's a fine, right? And he's been a big proponent on it.
Yeah, that GoFundMe for Travis Dermott would have popped pretty quick, I think, if he had gotten fined. But no, I mean, the PA was sort of waiting to see what their league's reaction was going to be. They didn't want to be proactive on this. I think that they were going to kind of react to whatever the league decided to do. And for a while, it was kind of up in the air publicly. But again, behind the scenes, they had been meeting about the Pride tape issue. There was momentum already to get this thing overturned. I think that the Travis thing pushed it over the top. Maybe the Scotiabank thing had some influence on it. I can't be sure, but I think it's a reasonable question to ask. And then you also had the first Pride night of the season coming up this Friday, or coming up the Friday after Dermott taped his stick in Arizona. So there were some pressure points along the way that the NHL had to deal with, and because of that, I think that's how we reached the decision. But again, like the thing they didn't anticipate, and it's because they're very short-sighted on a lot of these things, is how much attention this got outside of the hockey sphere. I mean, I've done shows that are not hockey shows about this issue. It's been covered by websites and social media feeds that have millions of followers that are there for like who Ariana Grande is dating, that are covering this issue. Like they had no idea how big this was going to get, and how petty they were going to look. And it's not a huge surprise, I don't think, that they reversed their policy on this one.
Do you see a world where maybe next year or the year after they go back, I guess very quickly, go back to the pregame jerseys? Because obviously here in Vancouver, we're Punjabi from the Sikh religion. They do Diwali night, right? And then the cultural jerseys, Pedersen had his name written in Punjabi, right? So obviously that holds a lot of power when you do the auctions and stuff. And I'm sure same thing with Black History Month for Dakota Joshua, Indigenous people when Ethan Bear was here. Do you see a world where they'll go back to it because, charities might not be making as much because a player worn jersey is different than just a simple autographed jersey as well?
Yeah, that's my theory too. I think two things in that. They're going to be collecting, I think, data this season to really understand what the impact financially was for these charities. Now, it's hard to really quantify the visibility aspect of it. I had somebody in San Jose who works for an organization that helps like troubled gay youths in locally in San Jose tell me that like the Sharks not wearing those jerseys had an incredibly bad impact on what the visibility of their plight, basically. And like you can't really quantify that, but you can quantify how much these jerseys draw at auction. And the teams are still making them. The NHL said, still make these jerseys. Players can't wear them, but still make them if you want to auction them off. And truth be told, the first couple of auctions that have happened that have, pulled in some pretty decent money. I don't know if that's going to be an anomaly. People want to like overly support the causes because the players aren't wearing them. I'm not sure what that noise is, but there's no question that the jerseys are still raising money, which is great news for the charities. So I think they'll take that data and then, see how it compares to previous seasons with game worn jerseys. And then I also think that, like, as we saw with the Dermott thing, and as we'll see with the Pride tape stuff, I think the further we get away from what they perceive to be the demonization of certain players for not participating in these things, the better it's going to be for the players who do want to participate to maybe have a chance to. So if they're still making the jerseys and you no longer have a mandate that players have to wear them, and it's not going to be 19 guys wearing it and then one guy not, and you make it voluntary, I think there's a path towards maybe allowing players to represent these causes, as you said, with the Diwali jerseys, and also like Hispanic Heritage Night and places like that, artists making these jerseys, and they're great and they're awesome, and putting the spotlight on them. I think there's a path towards maybe having players independently wear these jerseys if they're available, while not having the same sort of everybody wears it together type thing.
Okay, we'll move on to a different topic because we could honestly talk about this for the whole time. Well, before we get into the teams, because we'll make that like a more of a quick fire, rapid fire thoughts. Because another thing I want to talk about is the viewership in general. So you cover the NHL in America. You're also American Devils fan, from what I hear, and
that's a good choice.
But
How is it?
how is it covering the NHL in America where it's predominantly NBA and the NFL and maybe college football also dominates the scene? Should you're obviously on ESPN, so should more ESPN shows talk about the NHL, like First Take and Get Up? I know I'm not sure how much you could say about that, but like other shows as well.
I'll get up that early. No. I mean, the thing about, so it's kind of two separate questions. I think on the ESPN front, since we got the rights, obviously there's been a much larger investment in putting the NHL on different properties and trying to get as much coverage as we can about the league than there was in previous rights holders deals in the US. I mean, like we have a show called The Point, which is like an hour-long show that is specifically about hockey. NBC, as far as I know, during their entire time having the NHL rights from like 2005 through 2000, well, whatever the hell last like 3 or 4 years was, didn't have any like dedicated hour programming on a weekly basis to hockey. The fact that you're seeing people like Austin Matthews on the Pat McAfee show, that's a huge deal. That's reaching audiences that maybe aren't necessarily watching the sport. So, the people looking for, PTI or First Take to hash out the second unit of the Edmonton Oilers power play, like, and it probably ain't gonna happen. Like the NFL is a big deal, and they're gonna talk about the Dallas Cowboys a lot on those shows. But I do think that, and I've been personally really impressed with how much hockey has gotten some shine from other shows, and certainly gotten a lot more real estate on our network than it has in previous rights deals. As far as like making and bringing hockey to a U.S. audience, like that's been my job since I got started. Like when I started Puck Daddy at Yahoo, my whole gig was like, I'm gonna try to reach those audiences that are watching basketball and football and are like in just obsessed with those storylines that those sports give you, and let them know that hockey has its own stuff going on. So, me personally, like I've always been writing for a huge general audience. I've always been trying to expand the tent of hockey fandom in the US. And I think there are definitely ways to do it. And I think that since I started, that the media has gotten better at knowing how to do it, like put the emphasis on the players, put the emphasis on rivalries, put the emphasis on the playoffs when hockey's at its best. Like, I think the conversations move towards places that are an easier sell to audiences than, oh my God, these people are skating on Ginzu knives on ice and everybody's Canadian, which is like what most people in the US are saying about hockey, and they get very scared. I think people have gotten better at selling the sport to US fans.
Just to follow up, so like you mentioned Pat McAfee show, and obviously it's crazy seeing his reactions. He loves the hits and stuff. So like, what do you have to say for his show and like how he's promoting hockey, like how he has these last couple of weeks?
He had Bedard on, and he's Canadian as well.
Yeah, it's awesome because like when I think about the way hockey should be pitched to general audiences, I think a lot about Men in Blazers. You're familiar with Men in Blazers, the soccer podcast, and those guys. They cover soccer internationally and World Cup, Premier League, whatever, with such like unbridled enthusiasm. Like it makes you want to get involved in the conversation, whether they're being positive or negative. There's like an enthusiasm about the thing that they're covering, and for a long time in hockey, it's felt like a lot of people covering the sport out of obligation more than like abject enthusiasm about the things that they're seeing. So to have Pat McAfee as sort of like a hype man doing 10 minutes of highlights on the show and putting the spotlight on the things that he likes within the sport is awesome, because we need more advocates like that. Like, you watch the NHL awards and it's like Jason Priestley shows up. That's great. Love 90210 25 years ago. But like, if Pat McAfee shows up, then that's really cool. That's somebody current and in the zeitgeist and speaking to an audience that may not be watching hockey. So I'm all for it, man. Like, I love the fact that he's enthusiastic about it. I love the fact that NHL players are getting on that platform and showing off a different side of themselves. It's really only a good thing.
We would love to see you on that show, hopefully, if he invites you out.
I don't know, man. I don't look good in the tank top, so. But no, like I would love to go on with Pat. I'm a huge McAfee fan. Like, I think that his approach to sports is great. His approach to that show is great. And I mean, my God, like, any guy that can step into a wrestling ring with Vince McMahon is going to be pretty high in my book. So let's get people.
The last thing, just a very quick thought before we get into like your thoughts on our couple of teams here. I feel like because the whole international situation where we haven't had best on best, I feel like once that comes back, and with how good the US is now, and then the rivalry with Canada, I think that will help promote a lot in the US as well, because we saw it with the World Baseball Class. I know baseball is a US sport, but like soccer, for example, people were tuned into the men's soccer this year. So I feel like when Matthews versus McDavid finally goes down, eventually Bedard versus Jack Hughes down the line even.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to beat Canada and win gold. You guys don't have any goaltending to speak of. And
Carter Hart's looking good.
Please. Unless Tortorella's coaching Team Canada, I ain't gonna last. So obviously we all know that we haven't gone to the Olympics in the last couple of cycles because. But your point is a good one, which is that there is absolutely nothing that juices an American sports audience more than patriotism and jingoism and the chance to see a national team win a championship, be it in women's soccer, be it in the Olympics every 4 years. It's something that gets people to watch. And so if we have a situation where the NHL is back in the Olympics and the US is playing for its first gold medal since 1980, or trying to win its first gold medal since 1980, I should say. We've definitely had our chances, and Canada ruined them. You're gonna have people watching, and it's gonna be that moment that the NHL's been chasing for a while, which is Jack Hughes holding a gold medal in his hand. Now that's an iconic image for an American sports fan, or someone else doing it. You're right. Like that's a huge sea change moment for the sport potentially in the US, because you're just gonna have so many people paying attention.
Don't worry, we have Connor McDavid, and there's no answer for that.
Well, and you still have Sid too. Like, I mean, that's the thing that's kind of fun. Is it still within the window where we're gonna have McDavid and Bedard on one line, and then that like Sid Marchand line, on another line? Like, you guys are still stacked and loaded. It's just I don't know who's gonna stop the puck. Yeah,
no. Offensively, it's totally Canada. Defensively, especially goaltending, we all know that's the US bread and butter. But so that's what I'm saying. Get this going.
Like, I'm not deputized by the USOC to make this deal, but I'll trade you a goalie if you want to give us one of the Connors.
I'll take Demko and Hughes.
Right. No, you're not getting any of the. Nobody named Hughes is going back the other way. Okay, those boys have to play together for once.
Yeah, perfect transition. Speaking of Hughes and Demko, obviously we're Canucks fans from the Vancouver area. We always see you banter with Halford and Bruff all the time. Well, listen, I guess because it's radio. But off the bat, like thoughts on the team. Early good start, which is last 2 years. Obviously, we've been hearing they're out of the playoffs within like 5 games. But yeah, thoughts on the team. Where do you think they'll end up? Is this just like a dream start for them, or they'll come back down to earth, or do you think this is sustainable? Because I have them as a wild card 1 spot. I think you had wild card 2.
Yeah.
I also had him in the wild card, and it was weird because I had some people kind of like question it. I did Calgary radio before the season. They were not very happy with that pick. They couldn't understand it. It was like me saying that the Seattle Mariners were going to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like they couldn't conceive the idea of Vancouver being in the playoffs again. I I think it's sustainable. As long as they're healthy. I think I'm always concerned about guys like Besser who historically had a hard time staying in the lineup. Petey's got to stay healthy, and obviously maybe the key to the whole thing is Quinn with the way that he's played. I mean, 25 minutes a night, just playing. It's funny, like at the beginning of the season, everybody seemed to be on Miro Heiskanen's tip as being the guy who's going to like ascend to the Norris Trophy this year. Like I have no qualms in saying I think that guy probably is actually Quinn Hughes as if he gets the support because he's just been fantastic. The thing that's most impressive about him, though, and the thing I really liked about him was the idea that Rick Tocchet got a full training camp and most of last season to kind of assess the roster and put his stamp on it. Now, I'm not portraying Rick Tocchet to be like Rod Brindamore, like he ain't like some coaching savant, right? But he is a guy that I think has always been adept at motivating players and understanding players. And, the fact that like 2 or 3 games into the season, he was already calling out Vancouver for playing soft is like, all right, that's great. Like keep them on their toes, like get them to understand what it is you're looking for. Don't hesitate to lay the law down with a team that needs it. And so I think there's been a lot of positive signs for them early in the season, and I don't necessarily think that they're going to wane.
Sticking to in the division, I guess when we did our season predictions on the standings, the one team that Jove and I differed from was the Seattle Kraken. So I had them saying they're going to finish 6th behind Calgary and the Canucks and ahead of the 2 California teams, the Ducks and the Sharks, whereas he had them finishing third, so ahead of LA and all these guys.
Ahead of LA. Oh my goodness.
This is like where I think this is like the team where it's hard to predict based on what was last year a fluke or not with Jared McCann score 40 goals. So what are your thoughts on the Kraken very quickly, and how do you think they will do? Because they already started off bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say like fluke is such a tough word, man, because like they played well last year. They really did. Like a lot of the things, and they also played well in their first season too. It's just that it was undercut by bad goaltending. The problem is that eventually for teams that absolutely shoot the lights out, there's always going to be regression on shooting percentage, and they're seeing that in a pretty major way so far this season. That's why I picked them to miss the playoffs. Like I didn't think that they were going to be able to be 4th in the league in goals scored like they were last year. Like I don't think that's sustainable. So if they regress offensively and their goaltending still stinks in the regular season, like Grubauer like pulled a Bobrovsky last year, where like he was like mediocre in the regular season, then was insane in the playoffs. Then it's not a recipe to make the dance, and I think that they're gonna regress a little bit this year. They won't be terrible. They'll probably turn it around. I would expect them to put together a nice winning streak at some point to make things interesting, but I think ultimately they'll probably fall short of the playoffs.
Next team, the Oilers. You have them winning the cup, I believe.
Yeah.
Who's
thanks.
Who's your finalist? Who's your finalist?
There's the Oilers and the Leafs.
Okay,
so you got all Canadian.
I just want to see your country go insane. I want to see like the Purge Canada when the Oilers and Leafs.
No, my aunt's a huge my aunt's a huge Oilers fan, so she'll love you for that pick. But I guess
again, not to keep evoking Calgary, but I made that pick specifically for Calgary just to see their heads explode. do I root for the Oilers against the Leafs who I hate? Do I root for the Leafs who I hate against the Oilers? What the hell do I do? I'm a Calgary fan.
Yeah. So mine was the Devils over the Stars, and yours was
I had Hurricanes over Stars.
So what do you think of that thing?
The Stars are. The Stars are a good team, a really good team, and if they cannot run Jake Ottinger into the ground in the last like month of the season, then I think they'll be better for it, because he certainly ran out of gas last year. They're good, they're deep, they're talented, they can score goals, they can defend well. It's not a bad choice at all, being that they were the bridesmaid last year. That being said, Vegas and Colorado look pretty damn good off the blocks here. Vegas in particular is playing like it's like they figured something out defensively in the playoffs, and they've just carried it over to this season. Like they're playing so well, and that's without Pietrangelo too. So like they've done really well, and they're kind of scary right now. The Oilers are what they are. I mean, they're kind of a mess right now. They've regressed in ways that I didn't expect, especially with their goaltending, which has been atrocious. Like defensively, they're mid. Their goaltending is bottom of the league, especially on like high danger save attempts. So it's not good. The Devils are a weird one, because like they're clearly going through something right now, particularly on defense. And their team defense last year was great. They used their speed. They were smart. They were like owning the neutral zone. They're not playing with the same pace and like flow that they had last year. And also, I was telling people like the loss of Damon Severson and Ryan Graves off their blue line, while not necessarily like two world beaters in their own end, is certainly going to impact the offense a little bit. In particular, Severson was really good at zone exits and making that first pass to kind of spring them the other way. And I think they're adjusting to life without those guys back there, and adjusting to life with Luke Hughes back there, who's a different kind of defenseman. They'll be fine, but they just have had curious lapses in their effectiveness early in the season that gives me a little bit of pause about them. That being said, Jack Hughes is probably going to win the Hart. That guy is
he's killing it.
He's playing on another level right now. I literally never in my life as a Devils fan ever thought I'd see an offensive player this good. Like,
is there a world where the Hughes brothers just somehow get the Calder, the Norris, and the Hart?
Yeah,
all three of them win. Yeah,
I mean, Luke winning the Calder is going to be real tough because you're starting to see a lot of people lining up behind Bedard for that trophy.
Yeah.
Like Fantilli has been great. Cooley's, I think, got more points than Bedard through the first few games of the season. Now you've got this Portra guy on Boston who's like going to be maybe the number one center potentially playing with Marchand. Like there is more than a few candidates up front that are going to be jockeying for the Calder. That it's going to be unless Hughes has a Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar-esque rookie season, it's going to be really hard to break through that noise to win the Calder for him, I think.
Yeah. So Greg, last question here. So there's 3 undefeated teams: Bruins, Avalanche, and Vegas. Which one do you think is going to fall off first, and which one will remain undefeated for maybe forever? I don't know.
I mean, my money's on Colorado and Vegas to sustain it. Boston is still a team that is challenged up front. I think they've had. I'm not a big strength of schedule guy. I think a win's a win, but they certainly have had an easier path than most teams to start the season. Look, they're a playoff team. I've said that since the start. I think when your foundation is Ullmark and Swayman and Jim Montgomery's coaching system, and then McAvoy and Lindholm playing most of the game on your blue line, like you're going to be okay. And I'm not shocked they've gotten out to the start they've gotten. I think, but of those 3, they're probably the one you'd have to say is going to probably fall off.
Yeah, because a hot take for us was we had the Bruins missing the playoffs, and then right now, overreaction like NFL style, they're probably winning the cup. So
yeah.
I think all of us are trying to figure out who leaves the top 3 in the Atlantic to then make room for Buffalo or Detroit or Ottawa. And I saw a lot of people picking Boston. I didn't think that was the right pick. I picked Tampa, which may not be the right pick either, because they're doing the thing I was worried about, which is basically the winning game is based on the strength of their stars. Could be Florida. I mean, Florida's kind of okay, not great right now, but they have a funny way of getting on a roll as the season goes on.
I mean, it's Atlantic Division. It's
exactly
the hardest division in hockey.
Yep. Greg, we would love to continue more and more. I know we gotta let you go here, so we appreciate you a lot for doing this. But before we let you go, promote where could people find you? Check out your work, and hopefully we could do this again down the line as well.
It would be my pleasure. Yeah, the Drop, my podcast with Arda, we are in audio form this year. We were just on video form last year, which is awesome news for people who have missed me at a hockey podcast. Tuesdays and Thursdays on the NHL on ESPN podcasting platform, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on the NHL and ESPN YouTube channel if you want to watch us in little tiny Zoom boxes for some reason. And then also my writings on ESPN.com. And if you want more of me doing not hockey things, it is the Puck Soup Patreon. If you go to Patreon, look for Puck Soup. I have 4 bonus podcasts a month and 2 written articles on the Patreon about things that aren't hockey. Contractually can't be about hockey, but are still fun and good to read.
Yeah. Everything will be linked down below to check out Greg's work. And Greg, once again, we really appreciate you joining us. This was so much fun. We'll get up 6 a.m. for you again and no problems.
Yeah.
I mean, we buried the lead here. You boys got up super early for me, so I can't thank you enough. I mean, I lived in California for a couple of years, so I know the plight of getting up super early for radio hits. But
Yeah.
so I really appreciate that you did that for me.
Yeah, no worries. I get up around this time anyways for work, so it's just perfect. Do this, hop to work right away. But no, we
Exactly.
appreciate you. And hopefully we could do this again. And for everybody else watching at home or listening on audio platforms, we appreciate you guys well. And everything of Greg's will be linked down below. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Peace.